Would you describe yourself as a capitalist?
I would describe myself as a post-capitalist.
What does that mean?
It means that I'm looking beyond to the next system that isn't based on the present form of capitalism.
And what does that look like? Is money still part of that system?
Of
Is
course.
enterprise?
Of course, it's all what I'm talking about in terms of community wealth building. It's part of a economic system which is closer to our human flourishing, as human social beings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a sense, I used to be, and part of me still, there is socialism,
Mm-hmm.
there is capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seems to me that the next system will be more akin to a socialism, but it's not like the old socialism I imagine. It's a people, as I said before, a people-based socialism. It's economic democracy, where not the state owning the means of production,
Mm-hmm.
you do, I
Mm-hmm.
do. That's the future.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Patterson Podcast. Today's guest is a man called Neil McInroy. Neil was one of the lead advisors on a bill that the Scottish Parliament just passed called the Community Wealth Bill, or Community Wealth Building. This is a world first piece of legislation, and its implications are massive. It essentially means that wealth that's created in Scotland stays in Scotland. I'll leave it at that. Neil describes it in beautiful detail and nuance and in really nice ways, and I'll leave him to do that. So yeah, this interview I was absolutely buzzing by the end of it because it just feels so exciting and useful and just real practical philosophy and economics, which will actually make people's lives better, and they're really needed just now. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Neil McInroy. Neil, good morning.
Morning, Ross.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well, aye. Nice sunny day here in Edinburgh.
It is beautiful, yeah. I think spring is here. Is it too soon? Maybe it's too soon to say.
No, it is. There's warmth in that sun.
There is indeed. Do you mind just pulling the microphone just a bit closer? Just as close as possible. That's ideal. Thanks. Yeah, so first of all, thank you for your time today. Really, really grateful you sat down with me. I've been really looking forward to this interview as well. It's such an interesting topic, I suppose. For somebody who doesn't know what community wealth building is, could you maybe do an overview, a bird's eye view of what it entails?
Yeah. Look, wealth is a defining feature of all economies. Yeah. If joiners work with wood, or timber, economists work with wealth. Defining feature. Who has it? Where does it go? How do people get their hands on it? How does it act virtuously to the planet? So community wealth building says, hold on here. The way the wealth works, the patterns of wealth, is not working for us very well. It's not working for the planet. It's not working for many Scots. It's not working for the cost of living problems we have. So it says, let's change the patterns of how wealth operates so it truly works for us and for the planet. That's it in essence. And then there's a whole range of tactics and activities that actually make sure we change the patterns of wealth.
How do you define wealth? What does that entail?
Wealth is about, well, it's about income. Yeah, it's about assets. It's about monetary value, but it's also about that wider wealth of well-being. Wealth comes from an old English word, vila, which means abundance, feeling good. So it's wealth in its traditional income, monetary asset sense, but also in terms of that wider well-being. And of course, the economy we've got at the moment, you could say, does not promote that wider well-being. Yeah, it actually makes people ill, unhappy, stressed. So we need to create a wealth system that is well-being producing, and that part of that is to change the patterns of income and assets and the monetary elements too.
Well-being as in human well-being. Human, is that subjective well-being, as you said, health as well, including that environmental. Is that measurable? how do you know if you're taking away, as you're saying, stress part of that? How do you know if you're doing that? How do you know if that's been served in terms of well-being?
Well, there's generalized well-being and how you feel about yourself, which can be measured, and people, how do you feel? Are you feeling happy? Whatever. Other countries like Bhutan has a gross national happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be measured. It's a bit more subjective, perhaps, than say gross domestic product. Yeah. But it can be measured. And of course, in our everyday lives, we know when we're feeling good about things,
Yep.
and we know when we're feeling stressed about things.
Yeah.
So it's capturing that feeling good about our lives and the economic context to our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely see that. And also, just speaking from my own subjective experience, income and work as well have a huge impact on that for me. Well, they have been in the past. It's been times when I've been with very low income, low savings. It's unbelievably stressful. And then on the flip side, when I'm doing work that I find meaningful and maybe have a little bit, more than you need to survive, then it's less so.
Sure. And more and more people, more and more people in Scotland and the world feel stressed out by their economic conditions. And obviously the environmental issues that I face as well, which is partly driven by the type of economy we have. It used to be when I was, I'm a man now coming on to 60. It used to be when I was growing up as a young person, there was a ladder that felt like a social mobility ladder. I come from a working class kind of background. A social mobility ladder. I could go to school, go to university, get a job, get a better job, and up that ladder. That social mobility was there. Strikes me now the way the economy's run, a lot of people don't get some of the rungs in the ladder are broken. You can't get up that. So community wealth building is leaning into that. How do we actually create a system of an economy where people can feel fulfilled? There is opportunity. They feel control, have control and volition, and a sense that they are control of the economy. And too much now, the economy is something that's out there. It's abstract. It's me just fit into it. Economy comes from a Greek word, oikonomos, that means keeper of the household. It's something that should be close to us. It's a social construction, the economy. We can make it any way we want. And clearly it's not working in the way we actually want it or the planet needs. So community wealth building is about saying, hold on here, let's flip the switch. Let's build an economy that actually does work for us.
Nice. So how do you do that? How do we build an economy that works for us?
Well, this is what community wealth building is about, new patterns of wealth, as I said. And if you split up the different patterns of wealth, there's 5 different elements of wealth we need to reshape, repattern, re-embroider, if you like. 1, work, decent work, well-paid work, good terms and conditions. The simple, standard thing. Let's make sure we have a labour market and work opportunities in Scotland that pay well. A good day's pay for a good day's work, right? Yeah. Secondly, though, getting into more deeper economic thing. Secondly, land and property, huge source of wealth. Why don't we as Scots own more of the land and property? Why is so much of our land and property owned not by Scots, not even by a person, by distant pension companies, by distant absent lairds? Surely that value, that wealth, not just in monetary terms, in terms of the actual natural assets, why are we not owning that? So reshape, remake, a re-embroidering of the patterns of land and property in Scotland. Thirdly, finance, massive source of wealth, of course. Finance is in the ether of the global economy. Why don't we kind of say, hold on here, can we not have more localised finance activities, credit unions, community finance stuff? Can we not repatriate some of the wealth so we can get our dibs in it and actually work with it? That's the third thing. The fourth thing is a really techie thing, Ross, called procurement, public spending in a sense. If Scottish government spends its money or a local university spends its money, it should be purchasing its goods and services from local Scottish companies, not from a global corporation. And with that, a whole multiplier of benefits come if you buy more local. And fifthly, and most importantly to community wealth building, is about what we call inclusive and democratic ownership. This is about us owning more employee-owned firms, cooperatives, community organisations, development trusts. That means these are organisations where we have a sense of control and ownership of it, not owned by distant shareholders. Put all those 5 things together, it's starting to rewire the economy and create new patterns of wealth and opportunity. That is how we create an economy that truly works for us all.
Nice. So the 5 pillars: work,
Yep.
property,
Land and property. Yep.
land and property. Who owns Scotland?
Indeed. Andy Whiteman does a great job on that.
I'm reading this book at the moment.
Oh,
I would love to.
forensic.
Oh man, fantastic. The episode before you actually was Jerry Hassan.
Oh, aye. Jerry's good, isn't he? You've got all good people on.
Exactly. So work, property, finance.
Yep.
Procurement. Yeah, and is that like government spending?
Yeah, or all spending that goes through public institutions, if you like universities, colleges, local authorities, health boards, all that money.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then tell me the final one.
Inclusive and democratic enterprises, which is, in a sense, ownership models, cooperative economic democracy.
Nice. Yeah. And so these can be thought of. Are these the 5 pillars?
They are.
Yeah. These, when you take these 5 pillars and then apply them to what defines a community? Like, how is it a geographical area? Is it a countrywide thing? You know, use Scotland, but then Scotland's part of the UK, but then the UK is part of, well, Europe. Used to be part of the EU, it's not anymore. We're part of NATO. You know, like, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How do you define where it needs to be?
Well, we use community and community wealth building as a proxy for saying where the economy should be directed towards. So it's about people in places, and that's different geographies. So it could be your neighbourhood, it could be a town, it could be your city, it could be a region, it could be a nation. So it's I suppose it's just, when we're not putting a geographical thing on it, we're kind of saying, let's make sure that the economy works for people and communities in places more.
This the first pillar, work. What is good work, and how should we think about work, both as individuals but also as part of collectives?
Well, we should think about what just taking that a bit different is that work used to be the way that most people gained income, and in way back in the 18th century, the start of the Industrial Revolution, of all the wealth we had, about 40-50% of that wealth, maybe even a bit less, came back to us in the form of wages. Yeah, the other 50-60% was taken away by those who owned the factories, owned the land. They took the profits and surplus away. But 40-50% came back to us in wages. All through the kind of 20th century, you've seen a rise in that, you know, like unionisation, employment law, wage policies. It got up to about 70% of all wealth came back in the form, not UK, in the form of wages. 30% went to those that owned it. And that, now since about the 80s, it started to tail off. And now, of course, in the economy we work in, including the possibilities of AI, work doesn't really pay. We've had an erosion of union rights and workers' rights and so forth. But you've also seen the sense that, you know, look at energy renewables, for instance. That's never going to employ the same amount of people as an oil rig. Yeah. Or even some of our production methods don't need the same labour force anymore. So that creates a big problem. We can't just get wealth through work. We're going to have to get wealth through owning stuff more. But we still need to push on making sure that work does pay. So the work pillar is important, but what is more important is the question about ownership and around land and all that stuff. That's much more important now because of the nature of the economy and the way the economy is going. AI will mean there'll be less jobs.
Mhm.
That means we, as people, need to own the AI.
Mhm.
Otherwise, how do we get wealth?
Yeah.
So there's a community wealth building work terms leans into that broader dynamic of the shifting nature of wealth that comes back to us in the form of wages. Does that make sense, Rose?
Yeah, it does, Neil. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Why? There's so many questions in there. I will get onto property and ownership because it's so important. First, why does production take less? You alluded to oil rigs and wind turbines. The labor force that you need there is just completely different. Why has that happened? How has that happened? Is that due to automation? Is that because we have different new technology? Like, I don't know exactly how many, like 80% of people used to work in agriculture in the US, but and now it's like 2% because we have these very sophisticated technologies.
Exactly that. Exactly that. Technology means that things are done by machines or robots and not done by individuals. So, even an oil rig in 30, 40 years ago was full of mostly men with manning the drills, all the servicing, spanners, tools, nuts and bolts. Now, in a sense, it's all done by robots or machines. So there's much less people manning even those oil rigs. And the wind energy renewables a massive economic opportunity for Scotland. You put the wind turbine up, it can be serviced remotely. You get somebody that goes and looks at it now and again. There's no labour really required. It just spins away, and clearly there's some work, but nothing like we had in the period of high industry and high manufacturing. Even if you look at building, construction, even construction now, a lot of it's done by tools, automated and machinery. So the key thing in terms of wealth, in terms of production, is we need to make sure that all of us have a stake in the machinery, in the tech, in the kit, in the innovation, in the AI, in the robotics. Otherwise, we're on a downward spiral to never ever gaining wealth.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many, again, just so many things there. One, is that, to me, that seems like a good thing. It's a good thing to automate. It's a good thing to make things more efficient, and it's to remove the human. Like take Henry Ford's car companies. It used to be there was just somebody along every stage of the production line. The 8-hour workday, all that kind of thing was built in factories, as you're saying, during the Industrial Revolution. Slowly, that's been phased out. You see videos of a car production line now. It's completely automated. There's robots putting all the parts in. Automation is a good thing. However, what happens to the person that gets replaced?
Well, this is how ownership's important, because unless we own more of the assets and more of the economic productive capabilities, how do we get wealth? So that is why community wealth building leans into that. That's why economic democracy is so important, because we're on a hiding to nothing if we think we're just going to get wealth through a job. A job is not enough. We're going to have to start owning more stuff. And let's make it more even homey. If you think about our towns, for instance, and you think about, well, if our town is dominated by a large supermarket, who owns that supermarket? It's not the local people in that town. It's owned by somebody else. So you may get some jobs, right, in the shop, in the supermarket itself. There may be some distribution warehouse jobs, but the main bulk of the wealth is taken away from that locality because of that big store taking all the income that comes in. So there's something important here about how we bring the economy back home. I'll give you another example. Say you've got, on one hand, you've got two coffee shops. One is a large global multinational. Yeah, we know them, I know the name it. And then you've got a local independent cafe run by Ross Patterson. Right? Now, Ross Patterson is from that town. Right? He's going to employ local people. So is the big global chain coffee shop. Yeah? When Ross Patterson owns that shop, when he makes a buck, what are you going to do with it? you're going to maybe reinvest it in that business, or you're going to improve your property at home. You're not going to go to the Cayman Islands. You're going to be paying your taxes, eh?
Yeah.
And you might think, oh, I'm going to need some coffee cups. Where am I going to buy the coffee cups?
Exactly.
Are you going to buy it for like a global coffee a global coffee cup company? Or are you going to know, I know a guy down the road who's making some cups, plastic cups. I'm going to get him to do it.
Yeah.
And that means the money is recirculated back through the economy. So wealth is kept within that place. And we know through many studies that about 220% more wealth is retained in a local economy by the Ross Patterson Coffee Company than it is by a global chain. Coffee cups, local employment, suppliers of suppliers. When you make a buck, you're reinvesting it in that place. That is the way we need to think about the flows of money and the patterns of wealth. And that's why ownership is so important. Local ownership of stuff is massively important.
Yeah, I can speak to that from personal experience. My parents started we had a family business. It was called Dreamcatcher Cabins, and it was kind of near Loch Lomond, and we built. There were log cabins right next to our house. There was 5 of them, built with sustainable materials, and they had like an outdoor bath and stuff, and they were great. They were a small business, family owned. We had Christine, who lived at the top of the hill. She came down and she was helped clean them. We had Mel, who lived in Killarn. I hope they're okay with me saying their names. I think they will be.
Famous now.
Yeah, exactly. But it was the same, and we would source our all of our supplies from nearby, from like the village shop. We would use sometimes we'd have Asda would deliver supplies and stuff. We'd use Amazon sometimes as well. But we really did make an effort to source locally. All our firewood as well. That we had log burning stoves and what. All I can completely see. I've seen that in practice. I've
Sure.
seen that, and it created jobs. It kept money locally. We had there was like the Black Bull was the local pub and restaurant, and we had a little deal with them that people from the cabins would go up to the Black Bull, and then they would get a small discount, like 10%, and then they would go and spend their money in there, and then they'd have dinner and stuff, and then they'd come back, and it worked for everybody.
Well, that example was a great example, and of course that in economics language is a local economic multiplier, and it's what makes the world go round. And that homey example, though a good one, what we're talking about in community wealth building is let's scale that up. Let's make sure we're going local economic multipliers on steroids.
Yeah.
More and more of that. And the more and more of that we have, the more secure and resilient we are, and it will enhance wider well-being because we've got more control and volition over our economic destiny. And at the moment, there's some thinking, too much old thinking, that thinks the secret to a great economy in Scotland is we just need to get some more foreign investment in. We just need to get some more American money in. We need a new Amazon outside Dunfermline. That's going to bring 10,000, 5,000 jobs. That local multiplier is really weak. So arguably you could say, well, we either try and get Amazon in, or what we do is we invest some of the sweeteners and sweeteners for Amazon to come in our cooperatives, in our local independent businesses, in our development trusts, in a local community buying some land where they could put some that all might be smaller, but it adds up to a lot more impact in the bigger scheme of things. If you're putting in £1 million to get Amazon to come, I would say forget it. Let's put £1 million in actually building development trusts, local businesses, community organisations, cooperatives. Let's communities owned wind farms. That is much, much more beneficial in terms of reshaping wealth and making wealth stick and more circular than just getting Amazon in.
Yeah. How should we think about work? So when I did a degree in journalism, it was 4 years. In my second year, ChatGPT launched. So when I started my undergraduate degree, I'd had a thought that I would quite like to maybe be a news writer. Then I first used ChatGPT and I was like, wow, well, this has been completely automated. How do you think we should be thinking about work in the 21st century in 2026? What should our mindset be towards that, and what should people be looking to do?
Brilliant question. I think we should be thinking about wealth and how do we gain income rather than just wages and work. And that means when people career service or advice, you've got an idea. You should be attracted to not just a work ladder, but also a ladder as how could I set up a co-op? How could I own a bit of land? How could I? I've got a dream to actually set up log cabins. How do I get to do that? There should be a career and an economic ecosystem that allows us not to think about our lives as a worker, but also as an owner of stuff. It shouldn't be the preserve of those people who are just, entrepreneurial or want to set up a business. It should be everyone thinking, how am I going to get income, and what am I going to productively do, and how do I get my dibs on productively owning things? And we need to have an architecture that actually supports that. And community wealth building starts to create that new ecosystem and that new architecture where to set up a co-op or to set up a development trust or to set up a community organisation or to set up a local business is done not in spite of the system, but the system actually supports that endeavour. If we don't get to that mass reorientation of how people see their own economic lives, we're actually saying to folks, you can expect a diminishing opportunities to just work and get wealth. There's no alternative. We need to get more and more people who actually own more of the stuff and own more of their own economic lives.
How do you do that?
Well, that's where community wealth building, the practice, the tactics come in. So there's 3 legs to the stool. There's 5 pillars, now we're on 3 legs to the stool. 3 legs to the stool of community wealth building. One is, we need movement. You're not going to get any change unless you actually convince lots and lots of people this is a good idea. So many organisations across Scotland, including development trusts, co-ops, child poverty, all saying, hold on here, we need to think differently about the economy. So a movement's important. This is the activism. This is like saying we need to have a different Scottish economy because this one doesn't work. The second thing you need is practice. Now, across Scotland, there's a range of people, like your family. There's a range of development trusts. There's a lot of co-ops. There's a lot of land buyouts. There's lots of community-owned wind turbines. There's lots of people doing buzzy, interesting, independent things. Yeah, all that's done in spite of the system. Community wealth building says, hold on here, we're going to create platforms to allow that to grow. And thirdly, as the platform, we need policy. Policy around work, policy around procurement, policy around finance, and legislation. And 3 weeks ago, the Scottish Government passed a community wealth building bill that creates the enabling platform for that to happen. So I'm talking maybe abstract here, but in a sense, what we need to create is a movement, the practice, and these enabling platforms of legislation that allow this to grow. It's a long game, but the Scottish Government has said they want to do it, and we've got a range of practice across the country, and we will see in coming years that to grow and develop much further.
Tell me about the bill, Neil, because it's passed. It's past stage 3, yep. And it's now just waiting for royal assent, isn't it? To become an act. So tell me about the bill. What does the bill legislate for? And it's the first in the world, no?
It is, yeah. Yeah, it is. And the bill's important, but also it should be seen alongside the movement and the policy work. Okay? Movement and the practice work. The bill, now this is going to sound awfully techie to your listeners here, right? But what you've got is legislation's legislation, right? It's top-down stuff, right? I mean, there's lots of legislation, and it's like, well, what does that actually do? It's just a law and well, what it does is it says every local authority in Scotland, right, has to produce a community wealth building action plan, which means they're going to have actions at a local authority level that says, how are we growing community wealth? How are we growing the co-ops? How are we making sure local people can get more stake in land ownership? They're going to have to put in place actions which actually are talking about exactly what we're doing. So it'll be a whole range of things that each council will come up to, and they're legally going to have to do that. And also, importantly as well, the legislation does, in effect, it's an economic development duty. It says to local council, I've not heard them before, you've got a duty to do economic development in a way in community wealth building terms. That's pretty, if you think about it, that's pretty, it's actually retuning how people think about economic. We're just getting a big factor in here.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to support local ingenuity, imagination, dynamism to actually take more control of the economy. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is it says the Scottish Government need to monitor and report back regularly on performance. So they've kind of said to themselves, you mark our scorecard. Yeah. If you're not advancing community wealth building significantly, then we can say as Scottish people in a democracy, hold on here, we've not done very much. Or brilliant, keep on doing more. So they've almost like said, I'm open here, we're going to report on community wealth building and you can see how we're progressing as a whole nation. And thirdly, a very techie thing, they've said there needs to be guidance produced, which actually is the how, the who, the what, the where, how organisations pivot towards community wealth building. So we're at the beginning, and that coupled to the movement and our policy across the 5 pillars is all important. We're at the beginning of something here. But what Scotland is, and you know, I'm the global lead for community wealth building, so I work all across the globe on this, and there's many other places doing community wealth building. What Scotland's done is saying, this is a serious endeavour, and we're putting it in the statute book because we know we're going to have to move to a different economy.
Mm.
That is not to say it's not without its problems, because the forces of the old economy, the old wealth and power, the old monopolised idea of how the economy works, they're strong and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And Scotland has had what? Historical injustice is in our DNA. 800 years of feudal land laws, which only got rid of in 2004 off the statute book. It's got into our head. Yeah? You know, we don't take control of our own economy. It's somebody else is going to do it for us. So there's a cultural thing here we need to change, because we're too passive and probably think that things are done to us rather than actually taken in our own hands. But community wealth building creates a platform that kind of gives us license to take things into our own hands more. And again, that is really important for this time we're in. Look, we're sitting here on this day, a war, energy insecurity, inflation rising, property price, mortgages rising. The economy will take a nosedive, and globally and here, there's no much security in the world. There's no much resilience. Because we're not in control. We need to have more control of our energy sources and more control of our own economic destiny. Otherwise, we're going to be a offshored wee branch on the end of a failing economic system. It's imperative we do this, because our life's not going to get better unless we take more control over it. I'm depressing you, Ross. I can see you. But we've got community wealth building. That's the way, man.
It does send shivers down your spine, because as you say, that just like wonderfully put there, but just like almost like a vassal state with no autonomy, no agency, no energy security, no resilience at all, and natural resource procurement as well. Say like fresh water, you know, all these things just become exploited, I suppose, and I do. There's another dichotomy I sometimes struggle with in my head, and one is that I feel that I am part of humanity, the part of the human race, and that I've done a little bit of traveling as well, and I just feel that people everywhere you go are mostly the same. Everybody has the same. They'll want the same things. They'll care about their children. People are friendly and kind and warm and welcoming, and I do feel really part of the human race. And so in that sense, I suppose I'm a globalist. I just live on the same planet as everyone else, and borders are essentially, well, imaginary in many ways. Obviously, geographically they're created and stuff, but you know, when you pass between France and Germany, there's not actually anything there. There's lots of collective stories, but you can still just walk straight through it. So on one hand, I feel that I am just a member of the human race on planet Earth, but then at the same time, I also feel very Scottish. I feel that Scotland is my home, that this is where I grew up, this is where I live, this is my land. I like being out in the countryside. I like being here. I love Scottish people. I love Scottish culture. How do you square those things? Like, how do we, one, operate as part of the global community? Because, like, as you touched on climate change and environmentalism as well, that has to be it's like a humanity working together. Scotland can't do that on our own, especially compared to the superpowers like China and India and stuff. How do you square that? How do we both operate as part of the global community and then also protect our own, not become a vassal, not just become a branch on these massive global trees of monopolies and hegemonies? And
Sure. Look, you're a good man, eh? And you're like all of us, a human social being. We all are, eh?
Yep.
What there is in the world at the moment is a dissonance. We have an economy that's went out of kilter with us being human social beings, a species on planet Earth. The economy doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve the planet. It doesn't serve our needs, wants, desires in effective ways. So there's a dissonance there. There is not. It's easy to imagine, and many of us do, of course, and including yourself. We at one can be part of the human as a human social being and have relationships and connections, meaningful relationships with people all over the globe, sharing the same concerns, desires, wants, wishes, loves, whatever, as everyone else. We are as one. And that is indubitable because we're the human race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The economy works again that. So we need to, as people, as communities, yeah, in nations and in blocks of nations, we need to take more control of the economy that fits us. So you can be at once a global community, but the economy works for us. The global economy works for the global elites.
Yeah.
It works for the plutocrats. What is it? 20 of the richest men own the same amount of wealth as half the population of the world.
Yeah.
That's unprecedented in human history. 5 of the richest families in the UK own the same amount of wealth as 14 million of us. That's unprecedented in UK history. That is an economy going wrong. The ownership of wealth and power is too monopolised.
Yeah.
Community wealth building says, look, we need to have an economy that's like economos, back to us, back to our households, our home, our neighbourhoods, our hearts even. That's what's going wrong. The economy is the culprit because of let it run fast and loose, and only the top 1% or even less than that are getting everything, and we're just supplicants and vassals for that. So we need to start to turn the dial on it. That's a big point there.
Yeah.
Community wealth building is part of a mechanism, system change mechanism that starts to turn the dial and flip the switch. And people will be listening, well, that's all very well grand ideas. What's the change there, man? Well, Bishop Desmond Tutu said, how do you destroy apartheid? It's like eating an elephant, one bit at a time. How do we change the global economy that's so egregious? We change it one bit at a time by actions that we can take locally in our communities to actually take more control of the economy, a little bit at a time. More and more of that, and you'll have a society where the global economy comes in, but we're in control of it because we own the land, we own the production, we own the activities. There's a collective democracy that is penetrating that economic.
How, as you're saying, it can be top down. Well, the bill is it is top down. It's the government legislating for these things. But I've got one of your quotes here, and you say that
there's no swearing in it, is there?
That's fine. Swearing's encouraged here. We don't give a fuck. Where is it? I just want to make sure I read the right one here. Because it's about happening from the bottom up. Here we go. So the harshest critics of neoliberalism often assume that it will collapse under the weight of its own contradictions or because of dramatic top-down change. But enduring change tends to emerge from bottom-up movements supported by policy frameworks like the CWB bill that help communities and institutions develop the tools and the capacity to make meaningful progress.
Yes. Did I say that? That's not bad.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, there is some who think that neoliberalism, the capitalist system, including Marx, I suppose, it'll start to destroy itself under its own contradictions. Yeah. So it'll it's got to a state where there's only a few own wealth and power, and people will go, that's not right. We need to vote people in. It's going to change that wealth and power. And what we're seeing, particularly from America, where I work most of the time, in America is what's seeing is the democracy, that democracy, at a federal level certainly, has been captured by wealth and power.
Mm.
It's been captured by oligarchs. It's been captured by the 1%. So we can't rely on democracy to change it. Yep. So that's one bit how it could collapse, but it's not going to, because the democracy is in cap in hand with the power, the economic power that's there.
Mm.
Also, the big the plutocracies and the plutocrats in the world, the oligarchic power, they actually now have industries and economic activity like the big tech companies, the big retail companies. They actually control so much. Yeah, they're accumulating wealth and power to an extent where people like Elon Musk are kind of thinking, well, we may have ecological collapse. Now, I need to prepare for that. I need to look after myself. I'm going to see if I can live on another planet.
Mm.
He's actually planning to move out of here because he knows it's going to collapse. So it's not going to collapse. That form of economy is not going to collapse on its own contradictions. We need to take control, and it's not just about political control in terms of voting. Back to community wealth building, we need to take more control of some of those economic activities, bit by bit.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine look at energy renewables in Scotland. Energy renewables still dominated by big international fossil fuel companies. They control, and the big international finance. They control, a lot of the land that energy renewables, wind takes place in Scotland. It's owned by pension companies, lairds, not really owned by us. As Andy Whiteman tells us, it's a narrow band of ownership. So that industry in its own right is starting to monopolise, extract wealth to the people, the shareholders, and the big people that own the land and the gubbins. That is a key example of how we need to have a mass movement of community, municipal, democratic ownership of energy production. Because energy is important to all of our economy. We're sitting here with lights and heating on.
Yep.
Who controls that? It's not us. So there's a real urgency that we actually ramp up this economic democracy, this community and municipal ownership of things like energy. And you could say it's almost too late, but we need to get going and moving fast.
Why too late? In what sense?
Well, it's like the hare's running, the genie's out the bottle. There's wind turbines flying up everywhere, and a lot of them are not owned by us.
Yeah.
We also need to critique some of the social democratic policies that say, oh, great, look at that community wind farm, it's going great, look at that wind farm, it's going great, it's offering some benefits to the community. They make a big play of the small bits of reform, the small instances, without actually having a mechanism for scaling them up massively. So community wealth building is saying, we've got these small examples, good, but that's not enough in itself. It's there in spite of the system. Let's create platforms we can grow it massively.
There's a weird thing, I saw John Swinney talking about it the other day actually, and it's Scotland produces huge amounts of electricity, and yet we also seem to have some of the highest electricity prices in the world. How does that happen? How does that come to be?
Well, because there's production, there's transmission, and there's distribution. And on all of those levels, we don't own it. We don't own much of it.
Right.
So the transmission is the national grid. The distribution is the energy companies that we don't own. In fact, don't know there's any distribution companies in Scotland that we actually own. There's not a Scottish power which we actually own democratically. So the reason why it's expensive and not cheap because we live near it is because all those shareholders across all of the supply chain, across production, transmission, distribution, they're not us. They're wanting their slice. Every come April the 1st, at the end of the financial year, they're looking for the dividends, and they demand 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% dividends, and that's taken away. And a lot of it's not some of it's obviously brought to Scots that might have shareholders in those companies, but most of it isn't. It's in the ether of the international finance markets. So it's more likely to end up in the Cayman Islands than it is to Bathgate. That's the harsh truth.
Yep.
A wind turbine, I've got wind turbine, I live in Argyll. The wind turbines around me, and there's a lot of wind up in Argyll. You know, they're spinning like a boy racer. You know, I mean, they're all the time, right? And I'm looking at that going like, how much is that? All of that there is blowing brilliantly. Oh, what a lovely day, all that lovely green energy. Right, I can be pretty sure 90%, 99% of the profits from that is ending up in Cayman Islands, offshore tax haven. It's no landing in Oban.
It's not going to that area.
No.
Where the turbine is.
Yes. And also what's even more criminal, in places like Shetland, where they've got masses, huge wind turbines, wind farms, it has the highest rates of fuel poverty in the United Kingdom. It's cold and windy up there, right? So they have the highest levels of fuel poverty, even though some people can basically step out their front door, hear it and see it. And a lot of those, and even more egregious, is France, Norway have state-owned energy companies, and the French people and the Norwegian people actually get more benefit from our wind and energy production than Scots do, because they have a proper energy company that invests in Scottish wind.
It's funny if it wasn't a fucking disgrace. Like, that is shocking. How did that happen? How is that the case?
Well, because we've had I wouldn't say it's not Scottish government's fault. I would say, you know, this is energy policy is UK decided. It's because the UK economic stewardship, if we can call it that, I would call it complicity, but it's economic stewardship is supportive of the global economy as it is, financial markets as it is, big global corporates, and the idea that they're an open economy which prostitutes, sacrifices itself for what they see will be the greater good in terms of investment in the country. That is a Thatcherite neoliberal model, which is literally killing the planet and literally making us poor.
I was just about to mention Margaret Thatcher there. You were saying that during up to in the 20th century you had, I suppose, unionization stuff, and then things changed in the 80s. Ish.
Yeah.
What changed in our economic models in that time, and what have been the repercussions since then?
Well, what there was prior to 80s, and it wasn't perfect, what you had is that you had democracy, the state, playing a intervening hand in the market and market forces. So it recognised that unfettered capitalism, unfettered neoliberalism would extract wealth and would push down on wages as a cost, not as an investment.
Yeah.
And so that was before the 1980s, there was a recognition that you need to mediate that forces. But Thatcher and a general neoliberal turn seen that was a block to corporate profits, financial markets. So they liberalised all that. And now we've got well, it's not even a free-for-all. It's not a free market. It's a rigged market in favour of those who own assets, wealth, land, and then accordingly they have the power. It was rigged in favour of them. And then we are now suffering the results of that. Interestingly, I mentioned France and Norway before. France and Norway did not have the same level of neoliberal economic policies, and they retained a sense that the state was a mediating force. Norway had the sovereign wealth fund.
Yep.
France retained state-owned energy companies. So it was a mediation of those global markets. UK abandoned all that. But in saying that, the genie's at the bottom. We can't just return to strong state. We've kind of went past that. We need to then actually mobilise communities and people, and that's where community wealth building comes in. Community wealth building is not in any way a old-fashioned state socialism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a people-based social, open brackets, ism, close brackets.
Yep.
It's a people-based approach to economic change. Not necessarily a state one, though there is a role of the state, as we've seen from the Scottish Government, in terms of setting the platforms and the regulated environments for community wealth building to grow.
But you facilitate people to do it, to start from the bottom up, and you facilitate the grassroots to do what people want to do. It's like, I don't know anybody that wants to just sit around and, people are proactive and they have ideas and they're creative and they want to be part of teams and tribes and communities, and they want to provide services and be useful and attain skills and knowledge and new knowledge and do science and art and all these like beautiful, beautiful parts of the human experience. Just, I do feel like that is being suffocated in many ways by economic models, which just, like just working at I'm going to name them Starbucks, like for a certain wage, and meanwhile they're paying minimal taxes as well, even while they're operating in the country.
100%. You've got it. That's it. You explain it better than I did, but like there's something here. It's philosophical, but the ingenuity of humankind, the models we create, the systems we create, the social constructions we create, like the economy, we can make the economy more fitting in with our human flourishing, our potential. At the moment, it's like it's got massively disconnected. What we're really saying, I said it before, is we're bringing the economy back home, so it actually works with our desire for something that's relatable, a desire for something that helps us to flourish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, in essence, philosophically, community wealth building is trying to do. It goes back to that Greek word again. It's bringing the economy back home and constructing something that actually is more equal and parallel to what we are as human social beings. And that shouldn't be out of our wisdom to achieve that. It's common bloody sense. We've just let the plutocrats and economic markets serve the few, not all of us.
And as you say, it's not even like you can look a field for a further field and just see it operate. Like, it's not the way that the UK operates is not how the world operates. You mentioned Norway's sovereign wealth fund. I think it's worth doing. I want to get it right, but I think it's about $1.7 trillion it's worth now.
I think it might be more than that.
Is it even more?
Yeah, I think. It's massive.
Massive, and that was just like because I may be wrong, and you're far more qualified to talk on this than I am, but as my understanding is that they had North Sea oil and it was being extracted in maybe the 70s and 80s and 90s. I believe Norway took that capital and wealth and created this sovereign wealth fund, which now is of great service to the country and the people of Norway, whereas that didn't really seem to happen in the UK. And a lot of it, again, from my reading, seemed to have been, as you're saying, shipped abroad. The wealth was extracted, created, but then just moved abroad to, I believe, the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's figures, and I think there's a professor at Glasgow University, Graham Roy, who did some work recently on the amount of money that came back to the UK from North Sea oil and gas. I think published a few weeks ago, and I can't remember the figures, but it was tiny. It was not because it came at the same time, the 80s particularly, where there was a massive North Sea oil production. It came at the same time as that. neoliberalism and that Thatcherism we talked about. So it was not like, how do we get the state involved in all this so we can harness that resource for future generations. It was like, no, we have to play into the wider global market and let them do it. And so we're suffering the consequences. Also, of course, making a slightly political point, is that Thatcher used that at the same time as that a liberalisation of markets. She also was deindustrialising Britain at a rate of knots, and she used the North Sea oil revenue as a way of making the split between an industrialised UK to a service-based, financial-based UK, and so unemployment. That was if that North Sea oil hadn't been there, she would never have been able to achieve, I think, what she wanted to achieve, because there was riots in the streets and there was huge disruptance. There would be even more disruptance because the economy of the UK would have been tanking without North Sea oil. So it was used in a malicious political way, the North Sea oil revenues, to furnish her ideological craziness, actually.
Two Scotsmen talking about Margaret Thatcher. Today, there's a lot of talk about North Sea oil. Do you think it should be used and extracted, or do you think it should be left in the ground? Do you think the environmental cost is too high? Grangemouth is shutting. Do you think that should be left, or do you think we should be the green transition? You talked about wind turbines, and we've got hydropower and all these. Energy security has never been more important. Russia invading Ukraine, a massive one, and then now we have the conflict in the Middle East, which is raging today. But bombing of LNG sites and the Strait of Hormuz being cut off. How do we? What do you think about that? How do you think Scotland should approach that?
It's the simple answer is we should be moving rapidly to decarbonise, defossil fuels our economy, hell for leather. But we are where we are, and because we've not done any of the proper planning and any of the proper infrastructure to actually, we don't have a Statkraft as Norway does. We don't have we've not got that sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
They can make a transition easier than we can because they've got the resources to make that transition, arguably. So we should move hell for leather to decarbonise the economy. Individual short-term decisions, such as we shouldn't be opening any new oil fields or opening anything else, but clearly we need to taper out fossil fuels as rapidly as we possibly can. And we need to look at that much more in terms of our own resilience, our own national destiny, our own situation. We need to be a bit more selfish. And the as I said before, the remnants and fragments of that global economy, that reluctance of the City of London to actually look after our own country, is ingrained in their behaviours. So there's something really important about there's something there about it's hard to make the proper just transition because the UK mindset is still lodged in a economic way of thinking that supports oligarchic global financial power. So it's hard for us to make that just transition because there's some levers there we just can't shift. It's like an immovable rock. If you go right into the heart of the City of London, it's like, we still got to prop up the global markets. We can't start messing around with global finance. We're too much joined at the hip, and there's no flex in the state, as there would be in Norway, to make that just transition in a proper voracious way. So we're in a bad place. But unless we start like eating the elephant one bit at a time and start to take more control over our energy and have more democracy and transparency about what's happening, the better.
This is maybe a complex question and it has a lot of I'll come out and say it, but would you describe yourself as a capitalist?
I would describe myself as a post-capitalist.
What does that mean?
It means that I'm looking beyond to the next system that isn't based on the present form of capitalism.
And what does that look like? Is money still part of that system?
Of
Is
course.
enterprise?
Of course, it's all what I'm talking about in terms of community wealth building. It's part of a economic system which is closer to our human flourishing, as human social beings.
Mhm.
Now, you know, in a sense, I used to be, and part of me still, there is socialism,
Mhm.
there is capitalism.
Mhm.
Yeah, seems to me that the next system will be more akin to a socialism, but it's not like the old socialism I imagine. It's a people, as I said before, a people-based socialism. It's economic democracy, where not the state owning the means of production,
Mhm.
you do, I
Mhm.
do. That's the future, because that builds resilience. The more that the people of Bathgate can own the economic activity all around them, the better and more resilient they'll be, and the more human flourishing and sense of control and well-being they'll be. So it's neither capitalism or the pure old-fashioned state socialism.
Yeah.
It's a post-capitalism, almost similar to post-socialism, if you like, which is a people-owned democracy.
Mhm. Yeah, I can get so on board
But
with
it's
that.
not a third way. It's not some kind of, we'll have a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of socialism. It's not like the old social democratic model. This is actually something very different, a next system, if you like.
Does that have a name?
Well, people call it the new economy, post-growth, post-capitalism. It has all those names. But it's important to see it in the tide of history. Some people, political economists, think about these things and dwell on what it could look like. I'm more of a practical person, I suppose. And I'm thinking, I don't know what we call it, and I don't know. I know that is what's needed now, and the big change that needs to. What do we do right now? March 2026, right? We could argue. We could go down the streets. We could head down to Prince Street now and go like, "I'm for post-capitalism." Right, and shout, and oh, what's that about? Here it is, we've got a leaflet. What's that about? Yeah, right, that sounds good. Right, we could do that, right?
Yep.
Some people do that. Maybe I've done a bit of that, fine. But it seems to me that to eat the elephant, we're better just setting up a co-op, getting involved in a development trust, trying to get a little bit of land ownership,
Mhm.
trying to support fair work in the workplace, trying to set up a community finance initiative. This is the more practical tactics that are same as the post-capitalism, but we need to do.
Yeah.
We can't just shout.
Act.
And even if somebody did, and I'm not knocking post-capitalist debates and all that, but even if without a practice, without a movement, it's a scream in the dark, isn't it?
Yeah. That drives me up the wall, especially especially in academic bubbles. There will be just pages and pages and dissertations written about all these crazy complex social phenomena and words and all this lexicon stuff that's fine, legitimate, but it's like, right, so what do we do? And there's nothing. It's like, how do you do it? How do you take it from the theory and the academia and actually apply it in the real world?
Let me give you an example. I was in Meadville, Pennsylvania. You've probably never heard of it.
No.
Probably none of your listeners have heard of it either. It's a small town, 50,000 people in northwest Pennsylvania, right? It's an old tool and die town, as they call it in America. It's manufacturing, bootstrap economics, small scale capitalists, doing their thing, It's actually the home of the Zip.
Oh, wow.
That's where it was invented there, I believe so. Yep.
What a useful thing.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and so you can see it. It's full of like manufacturing companies, and a real vibrant in the 50s, 60s, 70s, really vibrant. Still is vibrant to an extent. Now those small scale, those capitalists in that town, some of them anyway, they are Republicans, right? They're not maybe Trumpian Republicans, but they're Republicans. You know, the kind of conservative type business, let business do its thing, that kind of stuff. Now, in that town, there's been some companies that have set up employee-owned firms. Democracy, workplace democracy. Some of the owners, the big capitalists, have said, we need to make this employee-owned. Why are they doing that? Why are these capitalists doing that? Are they socialists? They're doing it Because what's happening in that wee town is you've got big corporations going in and buying the companies, yeah, keeping it going for 2-3 years, asset stripping it year by year because it's good for shareholders, and then there's no company left.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using the employee-owned firm as a means of creating resilience. And also, I went to one of the factories and talking to the employees, the employee owners. They were saying, well, we make the investment, R&D investment decisions. So opposed to just paying themselves big dividends, they actually say, okay, we need to invest in a new machine because that's going to make us even better. They're making decisions that are enlightened to make themselves flourish in the workplace as well as make a buck. They're making decisions not based on just getting a shareholder return. They're making decisions, get shareholder return, but also make this business even more competitive and stronger. They also, I was in a factory that made little, very high-end metallurgy, metal parts for like helicopters and a whole range of stuff. And they've got this high-tech machinery. And some of the innovations of how they work the machinery, the workers of the machinery, it's the workers say, why am I pressing that button that way? I'd be pressing that button that way, and that would be more efficient. That would save me 1 second. And then they're actually, because they're owning it, they're actually more productive workers because they're thinking about how you can change things.
100%.
So that, playing into the thing about capitalism, that is just economic common sense. They've adopted economic democratic models to protect themselves from the ravages of this horrible neoliberalism. And the businesses are better because of it. And we know through lots of studies, I think 10% of employee-owned firms are 10% more productive than PLCs.
Wow.
And that's just in terms of productivity, not in terms of the wider social well-being and the wider sense of goodness that comes from owning your own company and having a say in it. And this is no dream. We could have many, many companies all across Scotland, we do, some of them, who go employee ownership because they know it's good for the workers, it's good for the owners, it's good for R&D, and it's good for the wider resilience of that company moving forward.
And it leads to more productivity. Because, again, it seems like the UK has, well, it does just have a productivity crisis. Like, it's actually, like, productivity hasn't just, I think it's reduced. Again, fact check it, but the system that we're using, if your goal has to be, or productivity is essential,
Sure.
like, it's a fantastic thing, but like the system that we have and the economic model that we have seems to be even choking productivity. But what you're saying is that if you put the ownership and back, or give workers agency, that even boosts productivity.
Well put. And a lot of the productivity debate, some of the productivity debate, is ideologically driven. Basically, it's about how we use capital, land, and labour effectively. And a lot of the productivity debate comes from people instilled with a neoliberal mainstream or UK mainstream economic mindset that doesn't want to get into things like, well, to make capital, land, and labour work more effectively, we should democratise the workplace. We should have more unionisation, union representation. We should be thinking about how the profits get recircled back in the firm. They tend not to think about that because that leads them down a road that says, that means economic democracy. That means we're going to break global financial interests. That means it won't be monopolistic anymore. It means we're actually going to give the people a say in the economic future of their own lives. That's dangerous stuff. So it's in some interest for people to talk about the productivity puzzle as if it's some mystery. Yeah, there's no mystery about it. But you've seen somebody says a productivity puzzle, they're usually coming from a position that believes in maintaining the economic hegemony that we presently have and denying the sense that economic democracy and different ownership forms are the future to more productive economic activity.
So it's not a puzzle.
I don't think it is a puzzle. It's not. No, it's not a puzzle. It's the answer is in plain sight. It's just that they choose to call it a puzzle because they don't want to countenance or look at the answer, because the answer works against their ideological biases.
Is there personal stakes in there as well, do you think? Do you think does that come from maybe some aspect of personal interest? Does maintaining that mental economic model maybe serve their own interests? Maybe that's a loaded question.
No, I think clearly there is not just the oligarchs who do well out of the prevailing economy. There's also a whole range of people that are senior within that regime, if you like, who do very well out of it. And they, like us, they're not bad people. They're human social beings.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're in a context which they can't see the alternative, choose not to see the alternative, because it would mean they might lose something. And I get it. You know, it's not their fault. The system's the fault, not the individuals. The system has got out of control. It's Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
You know, and they're just a product of it. But in saying all that, there's many, many more people in positions of power in politics and in economics and in business who probably wouldn't disagree with some of the things I'm saying. It's just that they don't know what to do on Monday about it. Well, now I'm saying we do know what to do about it on Monday, innit? In Scotland, because we've got community wealth building. There's something there that's coming down the track here now. So there is something. There's something concrete that does talk about the economic system change. There's no longer, we don't know what to do. This conversation, it's telling us what we need to do. And we've got a platform for community wealth building to do it. So there's less excuse now. And as we go forward with the community wealth building, there's less excuse for people to say what they say about productivity or Scotland's economy. It's like, our cost of living's too high, we need to do something about it. Well, we need more community ownership of energy renewables. And we've got a platform to do it, so get on and do it.
Yep. What happened in Preston? Tell me about Preston.
Oh, Preston. Right, well, Preston was, I can be a bit personal, Ross, a wee bit personal. In about, I'm an old guy, maybe before you were even born, 2006, 2000, yeah, you were born then.
Yeah, it was 98 I was born.
90?
98.
98. So you're 7 and 8.
Yeah, I was living it up.
When you were 7 and 8.
I was playing in the woods.
You're 7 and 8. I'm in, this is the period of Blair and Brown and growth in the UK, and we had the National Strategy for Neighbourhood Renewal and the Social Justice Unit, and we had regeneration money. Lots and lots of money around to help poor places across the United Kingdom. Transfer payments, we call it. You know, money coming in from growth, getting to the exchequer. We need to do something about poverty and disadvantage and deindustrialise Britain. We'll have these processes to put money back in. New bridges, new roads, new community centres, opportunities for young people, a whole range of stuff. And I was doing an evaluation. I work for a UK think tank, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies. I'm actually doing some of the evaluations of the efficacy of this programme. Huge programme, massive, key signature thing in the mid-noughties. And I'm going round and I'm starting to see all this great stuff, brilliant stuff, business parks and new stuff getting built, and I think it's great. And I spoke to a guy in an industrial place in the UK, economic development guy, and he said to me, we've got a new business park and we've got a new big store retail moving, we've got pedestrianised street, we've got new train station, we've got new houses coming up alongside the train station, we're getting the council housing is going to get done up. I think sounds great. And he goes, it must be, and I said, it must be changing people's lives here in this town. He goes, you know what? I'm not sure it is. He goes, the wealth is disappearing. The money's coming in, but it's disappearing. There's gentrification. People are getting displaced. There's something called the Magnolia moment, he said to me. I goes, what's that? He goes, it's somebody, he says, a resident told me this. The house has been painted a nice magnolia colour. Everyone's looking lovely. They sit down and realise, I'm still in the same position I was yesterday. Nothing's really changed. It's all getting tarted up. but it's not. So that got me thinking about wealth and the patterns of wealth. That was the first thing I got into community wealth building. I subsequently learned about stuff in Cleveland, in Ohio, and then I thought, let's try and bring this back to the United Kingdom, the idea of community wealth building. Firstly, there's a whole range of stuff we tried, and eventually we landed in Preston. Now, Preston was the first trial of community wealth building in the United Kingdom. And the reason Preston was important was two reasons, really. One, it's a pretty small town, manageable, 150,000 people. Secondly, well, three things, really. Secondly, it had a plan for its town centre, which was called the Tithe Ban Project. You know the kind of thing you've seen when people talk about the regeneration of a town centre? It's like, big store retail, escalators, all pedestrianised, those wee trees that look like lollipops, right? It was all that, yeah, and it was like looking great, and there's lovely, happy families, it was all that dream, a new town centre. It was going to be for the 21st century. It looked a bit like a bit of Dubai, brilliant. That's going to be Preston's town centre. That's our economic future. Came after the global financial crisis came. The Australian pension company pulled out. Preston, Lancashire, that's not going to work now, No, we'll go to Manchester, Liverpool, or Birmingham. Preston, no. They pulled out. So there was no economic development, no wealth coming in for this big dream. They had to think of something else. And the leader of Preston, or a senior person in Preston at the time, said, I heard about this community wealth building thing. Maybe we can try that. Let's look at the wealth we've got. So what we did was, first of all, was looked at procurement. We looked across all the public institutions in Preston, the two local authorities, the university, the college, the housing association, and we found that they spent collectively nearly £1 billion. I think it was £900 million over the course of a year. Yeah, that's what they spent. A lot of money. Yeah, but we found only 18% of that money actually landed in businesses and organisations in Preston, and only about 30% landed in Lancashire. So in effect, 82% of that £800 million was disappearing somewhere else into the ether of the global economy. So we thought, hold on, why don't we get local businesses bidding for those contracts? Why don't we change the procurement process to actually help them? And so after 4 years' work, it went up to I think about 40% in Preston and about 70% in the wider Lancashire, which was equivalent of £80 million and £200 million in wider Lancashire. £80 million coming out of a small place like that was worth about 4,000 jobs.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Jesus.
that was redirecting power, redirecting procurement spend to the local economy. And that was the Preston story. And subsequently, they've done stuff all across the other 5 pillars. And that was a kind of inspiration, I suppose. It was a test case that worked, albeit mostly on the procurement pillar.
But when you just procure from your local economy, it creates
the multiplier.
Yeah,
like the Ross Patterson coffee shop,
like the Ross Patterson coffee shop. Because well, exactly. That is just I can completely.
But it was
it's choice as well. It's
Yeah.
just choice. It's not. It's so doable. Like again, when we had our small business, we could choose. We had the Sky Soaps company. We had it was completely up to us. We had agency and control over that, and
absolutely.
And we only had, our budget was nowhere near 900 million. We were not spending nearly £1 billion a year. But it's the same principle.
It is, and all absolutely. And monia mickle makes a muckle, as we say in Scotland. Many a small thing makes a lot. So it's the soap company, the catering company, the building contractor, the office equipment, the office furniture, the computer supply shop, the marketing budget, the communication budget, all adds up to quite a lot. There's also one thing people might be listening and thinking, but it's more expensive. More expensive. Expensive. Well, it doesn't actually hold water, really, because what you have in some of these contracts is a virtual monopoly. The contracts are massive, like huge contracts, and the only people that could really they're written as a big thing, from design right the way through to implementation, say a building contract and a construction, massive, huge. And only one or two companies can bid for it. Because who's got the scale to do all of that?
Yeah.
And so they've got a virtual monopoly. And there's many test cases where there's been cartels. So it's like Ross Patterson, massive building company, Neil McInroy, massive building company. We're both going to bid for this contract because we're the only people that's got the scale to do it.
Yeah.
And we kind of say, Ross, what are you going to bid? Oh, I'm going to bid 10 million. Right. We'll go 10 million too. You think we can go 12 million? Aye, you go for 12 million. I go for 12 million and a pound. Cartel. Fixed. So the idea that it's cheaper to go big is not proven in many instances because there's a lack of competition. And neoclassical economics tells us the more competition you get, the lower the price and the better the quality.
Exactly. Yes.
So we make contracts in public procurement, unbundle them as we call it, break them up so you get chance for smaller entities to actually enter them. It used to be many, many moons ago when there was more state and more, you used to have things like in the 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, in local authorities, you had a building works department. Yeah. These were people who were in the construction industry who worked for the local council. And they knew about construction. They had knowledge. So what they did was they actually said, hold on here, right? They were aware of this local suppliers. They thought, we'll manage the contract, yeah, but we'll give a contract for design to that guy or woman. We'll give a contract for the kit to that company. We'll give the construction to that one and that one and that one. We'll give the marketing to that. They organised a supply chain that wasn't just giving it all to one big company. They managed the process. And that's the kind of thing we need in community wealth, Paul. We need that level of coordination that starts to rewire wealth and steward that wealth and those contracts in ways that are pro-local, pro-social, pro-local ownership.
And then also, and provide the service that they're meant to. Like, Thames Water keeps popping into my head as an example. Again, I'm sure someone listening will be more...
That dirty business thing. You've seen that TV program,
Yeah. It seems that is like some kind of large monopoly, privatized, that not only are they not doing their job properly, it is costing taxpayers obscene amounts of money, but at the same time, the service that they're providing, again, because there's, as you're saying, no competition whatsoever, and then there's no incentive to improve and keep iterating, and the Japanese principle of Kaizen, of just like the little, or what was the Scottish phrase you said there? The
ammonia, mickle, max, or muckle.
Ammonia, mickle, max, or muckle. Much better.
Much of a small thing makes a lot.
Exactly. Get that on the wall. Yeah, those little iterations that you're driven to do. It's the same thing when I'm doing this, because it's like, oh, I can make that better. Actually, I need to use a different system here. Actually, the light here needs to be, and it's these little things that keep adding up for better and better. Because in media, there's no shortage of competition, right? YouTube is just the competition is rife, and it's a competition for attention and all these kind of things. But there's people expect a level of quality, and because it is competitive, then you're driven to do that. But when you apply that to Thames Water, any kind of monopoly, as you're saying, or it's like one or two massive contractor, I recognize the value of economy of scale as well. I can see that the bigger companies are able to just more efficiently do things. But what you're saying is that if there is competition and you're breaking up these larger systems, bidding on these things, that actually you get a better service.
You do. And obviously I would say certain economic sectors are actually, in a way, natural monopolies. And water as a whole is just, it's a commons, it's a and it's a kind of like, water's water. We need water to do our stuff.
Yeah.
It's a kind of monopoly in itself.
Yeah.
Because there's only one product, water. I mean, there's different variations of it, one product. So the idea that you would privatize water, yeah, and you could create competition around it, it's kind of like a bit weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
I mean, Scotland, of course, doesn't have a privatised water company. So it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
So what you've got then is, and I would say there's other things like that, like it should be democratised, localised. We have control over it. It shouldn't be given to a private company to make money out of that. It's a fountain. If we don't have water, we die.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't let the market control that. It has to be us that control it. It's about that human flourishing and closer to us. It needs to be economos closer to us. We need to make sure that we control the water. It's vital for us, but also for the planet. There's other things as well you could put into that. Of course, we talked about energy. Should that be really privatised? We all need it. We needed it. Things like care, you could say. We're all going to get older. Should that be in the marketplace? People competing about how we care for our elderly, our mums and dads, our grandparents? I don't think so. It doesn't seem right in terms of what an economy should be doing. You could also go further and say retail, everyday food.
Interesting.
Everyday food, should that be open to the market in a way where they can decide what we eat, that supply chains are all marketized and open to speculation? Could it not be something where people are making decisions about what we eat and where it gets to our shelves that's closer to us? And that's and all that in retail particularly, it's not fanciful. If you can afford it, people do want to buy. If I'm buying a pack of peas, or we're all buying a pack of peas, right? I'm thinking, right, I think, and I've got the privilege to think, because I'm no poor, I'm not got my uppers. I'm thinking, where does this pack of peas come from? Right? Is this pack of peas, the person that's done it, are they treating their workers decent? Because I'm part of a global world and I don't want people like being exploited picking these peas, right? Is it got horrible chemicals that's destroying the planet on it? Is it been flown thousands of miles to get on this shelf? These things, and I'm no smarter than anyone, I'm just thinking I've got the privilege to think, well, I'll go somewhere else because I can afford maybe a bit more. Now that relational aspect, our products and our goods and services, is in us all. Nobody wants to buy a pack of peas where somebody's been beaten over the head to pick the peas, right? So there's, again, back to that relational thing, back to that intimacy, back to that control point. We need to have products that we can see the provenance, that we know what it was like and how it was how the people that were working on it were treated to get to that shelf. I was in Oban supermarket the other day, and this woman was standing there, and she goes, and I picked up a pack of Monge too, and it was from Guatemala, and I went, and I goes, and she goes, and I goes, look at that, it's from Guatemala. She goes, that's a long way away, isn't it? And I goes, hey, we can make our own Monge too here. And she goes, I know. And I goes, that's capitalism for you. She goes, it'll be something like that. Yeah. So, that I'm going off track, but that's an example of how so distant and so out of kilter the economy is. When things are produced, we don't know where it's produced. We need to get away from that.
Yeah. I had lamb from New Zealand in Sainsbury's the other day. It's like, Scotland is covered in sheep.
Yeah. Too many in my view. That's another point.
Yeah, well, I'd actually agree, yeah. But yeah, exactly. It's just like this huge, or even like pomegranates from South America, and it's like just these massive supply chains that.
Yeah.
It's like, how does it, and even like and all the preservatives and stuff that have to be put into it for it to last that long, and yeah, that is like a whole.
Also whiskey, in Oban, the Oban distillery, I'm going to get caught. I will not say that. In some parts of Scotland, the distillery is owned by a global corporate. Yeah, it's an investment. So whilst it's got a name that says, all the little Cathema are from this, and it's a local Burns, and it's a local this, a lot of the dividends, a lot of the shareholder profits are squished away.
Yeah.
And also, if you wanted to buy a bottle of whiskey, cheaper, because you're there, no way, it's more expensive. You may as well go to Tesco's to buy it in a way. So there's a lack of relationship with some of our industry. There's a number of distilleries that are not like that, where you actually go to the place and you get a better deal and so forth. So even some of our key industries there is a lack of economic relationship to the actual workers and the people in the place. And that, again, is down to this egregious globalization of our economy.
How do you maintain that maybe call it stress of competition for having people having lower prices and better quality of service, but then you're also saying about this the state being in control of, say, energy. Is it possible to do both of those things at the same time?
I think, yeah, it is. But I think I'm saying is that it wouldn't necessarily be the state control of industry. It would be the state creating a platform where many local, community, worker, municipal ownership of that energy. So they create the context by which there's many different localized energy ownership forms. So but the act directly to the question is that there's a toggle between local, community, cooperative ownership and the role of the state, and that will vary depending on the industry and vary depending on the context. But fundamentally, the state needs to be there to create a platform, as they do in community wealth building, to allow that local economic democracy to grow. That's its first thing. In terms of how, when that grows, to what extent will it need coordinating elements? Yep. We're not in that situation yet. If we had, like, say, 1,000 energy renewable companies that were owned by municipalities or communities across Scotland, and then it's like, hold on, it's all getting a bit, we need to create regulation and steward exactly how they operate and the way that they operate and how we create that distributed network into a whole that benefits Scotland, then the state needs to come in. But we're not in that situation yet. It's just, it's episodic little bits here and there. And GB Energy is a UK government agency. They at present are no way playing that sort of role.
Right. What role do they?
I suppose GB Energy act as they've got a local power plant that does support some community municipal ownership, but basically it's a vehicle of public investment that kind of supports the ongoing existing energy companies and the global players within that. It's not a disruptive element to the energy economics. It's more of a small reform to how the energy economics work in the UK.
On a similar vein, related but not the same, Edinburgh recently had 2 planning applications for AI data centers, which were asking for a combined energy demand of 400 megawatts, which would double Scotland's. That is like double Scotland's energy demand. So it's equivalent of 200,000 to 400,000 homes. How do you think that Scotland should adapt to the technology of AI?
Well, again, it's part of a system. We've got system problems and it needs system level solutions. And I suppose you've got on one hand that economic opportunity, and you would say you need to take advantage of that. But clearly then it puts a big strain on the existing energy system. So there's a kind of chicken and egg thing here. One needs to create, ideally you want to move to a situation where there is more indigenous, local, energy owned activity, when the dividends coming back to us in Scotland and in local communities and municipalities. And then things like the AI centre can plug into that context. That's the ideal, but we're not there, because we're not in that situation. So I'd be more comfortable if that proposal was put forward, and concomitantly there was also a process to democratise the energy system within Scotland. Then I would say, fine, I'm really comfortable with that. As it is, without a whole-scale process to build community wealth within our energy markets, that is an activity where a lot of the local multipliers will be squished away. So thankfully I don't have to make those decisions. But what I am saying is, in terms of community wealth building, it gives us a concomitant platform where those decisions, when made using huge amounts of energy, we know that the purchase of that energy will actually benefit us. There'll be a multiplier to it. And more community wealth building we get, the more likelihood and higher level of local economic, of national and local and regional economic benefit will be accrued. We need that. Otherwise, that particular economic activity will see poor impact compared to if we don't have that plural ownership of energy within Scotland.
I completely see that. If you're going to build a data center, it has to benefit the country and the people,
sure,
and the economy that's nearby.
There's also this is, it's not fanciful, but it's just a more looking future, is that at the moment, the data centers are located, it doesn't matter where they're located, because we have the national grid. And what they're doing is some of them have been located, they could be anywhere, and they've been located primarily in the old economic centres of Scotland, the deindustrialised bits, the big capital city.
Lanarkshire, yeah.
Right, yeah, they've been located there. And I can understand that for some reason, but there's not a lot of jobs there, right? But clearly, if you're thinking seriously about the future economy of Scotland and dealing with the regional inequalities, you may want to put it in Lanarkshire,
Yes.
But you may also think, and hold on here, we want to put this in the Western Isles, because that's where all the energy sources. And it's not the national grid, they've got their own localised grid. And the West Highland, so the Western Isles Energy Company are offering a good deal. Yeah. So there's not the strategic planning around that. We're kind of going, oh, well, Lanarkshire's poor, we'll stick it there. Well, actually, what is that? What is the 30, 40-year destiny of Scotland? Are we going to be a country of the same central belt, of the same size, with the agglomeration economics there? Or are we actually going to see a repopulation of the Highlands? Should that not be if we've got a distributed energy network, can we not have a distributed population as well? Can we not see the growth? And if it's not based around jobs, but based around wealth, it doesn't really matter where you are, because you're getting the wealth from the thing that you own. So you could be in Oban, Stornoway, whatever, because the job's not there, but the wealth is accrued somewhere else. So these are big, more strategic questions, but it goes right to the heart of what is Scotland and what is its economic geography. And we know, is it right that the Highlands and Islands continually depopulate? Is that where we're going? Should we not be thinking, in a time of ecological stress, in a time of hollowed out communities, in a time of where we need productive land, we need new forms of agriculture, new forms of self-sufficiency, new ways of living, should we not be thinking, hey, the real growth here is all that bit that nobody lives? Let's reimagine, let's repopulate and reindustrialise the Highlands. That big vision is not really there, and it should be. And hopefully community wealth building again can start to make us think differently about that wider economic planning and economic destiny.
That was actually one of my questions. Like, if you're going to try to create a vision of Scotland in 50 years, what decisions will we take today to optimize that and to make it as good as it can be?
I think it's what I've been talking about in terms of the community wealth building. It's certainly that. But we're at an early stage of this change process, I suppose. But clearly there needs to be a future of Scotland conversation that deals with the hard realities of the moment we're in. That neoliberal economy is not going to serve Scotland as it is. We need to flip the switch. Ecological crisis is upon us, and some places in Scotland will be no longer habitable. by the coast. Yeah, that's going to be increasingly difficult for us to sustain. We will need to look at energy security and look after our own. We're going to have to look at food security. We're going to have to think about how do people make a living when there's less jobs. There's a whole range of big strategic questions that lend itself to then thinking, what do we put in place now? Community wealth building, I argue, is one of those things that need to be put in place.
Mm.
And it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's not the only thing. There's bigger planetary thought. It's not up for old guys like me, really. It's up for the next generation, and they'd bear me below that, it's Scots, to demand those types of conversations and to not accept the status quo and to not accept the economic regime we're under and say, hold on here, Scotland needs to think differently. We love it. It's a brilliant small country, but we need to get serious here about what I'm going to be doing in 30 years' time as a 25-year-old. Because I'm a bit worried. I'm scared. Yeah. And we need to create policies and practices and a whole range of stuff that are planning for that next generation when they're retiring and they're getting to what is that going to be like?
Mhm.
I don't think there's enough of that.
Yeah.
There's apathy, isn't there?
Yeah,
It's hard.
Honestly, it absolutely permeates so many people in my generation as well. I'm Gen Z, and not the apathy, but also the cynicism and the pessimism as well. And it's not what young people should be. That should not be the mindset of young people. I understand when you're getting towards the end of your life and like, oh, everything's shite kind of thing. But as I said, I just spent 4 years in the university, and the amount of people that are just completely apathetic. They see the world as not only like this thing that they're separate from, but as something that they have absolutely no agency over.
Sure.
And that they're exploited by as well. So it's like, and they have good reason to be as well, because it's like, as we've mentioned a couple of times, working for minimum wage that's not even a living wage, that they have absolutely no assets. They have to rent their shelter. Rent prices in Edinburgh are absolutely brutal. The past 5-7 years, we've had the cost of living crisis where all goods and services prices, like even if you're going for a pint or whatever, people can't afford to, essentially. You have all these global crises that are unfolding as well, and then you start chucking in stuff like AI and all these just huge global, potentially cataclysmic, the intense global wars we've seen in Ukraine and in the Middle East. Young people are like, there's no 50-year vision, because it's like, what am I going to do in the next month? Like, I'm paycheck to paycheck here. Like, I have absolutely, I'm not speaking from personal, but like, owning assets, owning property is just this pipe dream.
Sure.
It's just like this completely distant thing that's for other people. It's for boomers. It's for they could do that, but for our generation, there's just no chance. And that is a fucking crisis. Like, if your young people are not thinking 50 years ahead and they're only thinking 6 weeks ahead, that's shit's going wrong.
Sure. No, 100%, 100% all that, and of course it's about the rungs on the ladder. They're broken compared to my generation.
Exactly. All those rungs are snapped, and they can't get to.
Sure, but that is and it's rational, of course, to be apathetic, to have a sense of hopelessness. I would say, and it is that things like community wealth building, right? It's not. It's written for the future. Well, it's written for now, but how do we get the future? It's something that I've been very conscious about community wealth building. I talked about the movement earlier. This needs to be grasped by younger people as the economy is buggered. There's no rungs on the ladder. I'm not going to get to own a property, right? I'm a wage slave, earning crap wages if I can get a job, right?
Yep.
We need to have a fundamental change in wealth and who owns it.
Yep.
New patterns of wealth. They might not have that flip and see that, but community wealth people is saying, "Look, we're here. This is for you. This is about reshaping the economy where you don't just expect. It's giving you a chance to flourish and have more control over your own economic destiny. That you're not just a vassal and recipient of it. You don't. The apathy is there. This is a chance to break through that apathy, but it needs activism and it needs radicalism and it needs that push. You know, a lot of young people, you know, I hate to say young people, some people turned off politics, turned off all that top-down stuff. It's like, oh, I heard that all before. Heard all that, just a bit here. Oh, well, it's like, community wealth building, I would say, having been around public policy for 30-odd years, it's different. It's different. It's speaking to flipping the switch. It's speaking to turning around how the economy works. It's not just another reformist wee thing. It's actually, the seeds of it is about deep change. It might look quite all the 5 pillars and quite fluffy and we do these things, a little bit of community ownership, but fundamentally it's system change, and it's something every Scot needs to get behind, but particularly younger people, because what else have you got that changes the system itself?
Exactly.
You can have a revolution.
Yeah.
I was maybe into that in my younger day.
Yeah, there's plenty. There's so much of that as well. It's like, no, fuck it, we're just going to burn it all to the ground.
Sure.
Like the whole system is rigged and we're just going to just raise it and start again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too cathartic and it'll cause more pain. Then you might get some people saying, oh, I quite like that little reformist policy around whatever. That's not enough. It's no system. Community wealth building, the phrase we use is evolution, reconstruction. It's reform, but getting right into the granular system elements. It's saying, why is a community wind farm a good thing? Right? Because it's catalytic. Because that is one epiphany or possibility of what a new economy could look like. And let's do it 1,000-fold, 2,000-fold, 10,000-fold. Then you've got mass change. So it's not reform, it's little bits of examples of that are hooks and barbs in the system to change the system from within. That's what community wealth offers. It's radical but practical.
Well, you've sold me, Leo.
Good. One thing you got. Let's go in Primrose Street and start rallying now.
Isn't it? Oh yeah, people signed up. Well, join the Hare Krishnas out there. No, that is thank you for sharing that today. That really is. I'm all fired up. You know, that is because it is real. It's practical. That's what I was reading. I was so excited for this today because it is like yes, this is practical. It's useful. It fits into our systems. It's not burn everything to the ground and start again. It's like no, let's like, as you say, the hooks and barbs just fix the system a little bit at a time and return and ownership, and it's all.
You've got it.
Hell yeah.
You've got it. Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Ross. I've really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant. I really enjoyed the discussion, and fair wind in your sails.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Patterson Podcast. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope it was useful. I hope it was worth your time and attention. I take your time and attention extremely seriously. I always will, and I'll always be very, very grateful to you for tuning in. So thank you for doing that. If you would like to stay in touch, I have a mailing list that kind of cuts out the middleman of all the large platforms, the YouTubes and the Instagrams, and allows a direct communication between us. I send the Patterson Post, which is a collection of ideas and my own writing and resources and stuff. Just try to provide value in writing to you. So if you would like to stay in touch directly, cut out the middlemen and form a connection, then I would love to have you on the mailing list. So please consider it, and I'll see you for the next episode of the Patterson Podcast. Cheers.